box there when it comes to Scottish independence. But we're going to move away from Scotland now. Prime Minister Liz Truss has strongly condemned the continued Russian bombardment of civilian areas in Ukraine. Obviously, Putin now reacting to what went on that Crimean bridge. The missile strikes targeted major cities, including the capital, Kyiv. At least 11 people have been killed. We would expect that number to rise, of course, and more than 60 have been injured. It comes after the only bridge that connects Russia to Crimea partially blew up on Saturday morning. However, Ukraine has not officially admitted any responsibility for the explosion. Putin himself said it was an act of terrorism. Today, Liz Truss met the Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky ahead of tomorrow's crisis talks with fellow G7 world leaders about this ongoing conflict. Meanwhile, though, President Putin has promised a harsh response to any other attacks on what he calls Russian territory. Let's take a look at where some of these explosions have now actually hit Ukraine. So as you can see on your screens there, if you're listening on radio, I'll talk you through it. Some of them have hit basically places including Ternopil and Lviv in the west of Ukraine, Dnipro, which is in the south of Ukraine. And there have also been missile strikes, of course, as we've reported, in the capital, Kyiv. Well, joining me now is Hanna Liubakova, who is a journalist from Minsk. And I think it's really interesting to our viewers and listeners as well as to why exactly we're going to Minsk. And that appears to be because actually there's some sort of coalition, an increased coalition between Russia and Belarus, which I think has got a lot of people very, very concerned. Would you mind running us through what the latest there is, please?
Of course. I think it's really hard to say whether this coalition can be even stronger because, well, these two gentleman has been launching the attack on Ukraine basically since February. Aleksandr Lukashenko, who claims to be the leader of Belarus, he offered Belarus the territory of our country as a launching pad for the aggression. What happened today is that he actually announced that there would be deployed a special military joint Belarusian-Russian group on the territory of Belarus that is going to be located near the border with Ukraine. And many immediately claimed that this might be escalation, and I do agree that this is escalation. It's not clear whether these troops would cross the border with Ukraine and whether Belarusians would be deployed, whether soldiers would be in Ukraine fighting against Ukrainians. But what is clear here is that Lukashenko is trying to divert attention of the Ukrainian army from the counteroffensive. They want the Ukrainian army perhaps to go to the north and try to defend themselves from this potential provocation from the territory of Belarus. So this is perhaps the meaning of this today's announcement.
Yeah, it is a key strategic manoeuvre, clearly, to try to divert some of the attention away from maybe some of the biggest build-ups of Russian troops, divert it towards Belarus, and then hopefully the Russians clearly can get straight through in that route there. But does this not open Belarus up now to be a potential legitimate target for Ukrainian defences and missiles?
Exactly. So today, basically, there have been a lot of talks about this potential attack from the territory of Belarus, which actually makes Belarus a target for retaliation. That's clear. Lukashenko is saying that this is because Belarus feels a threat from Kiev, from Ukraine. But it's clear that there is no threat from Kiev. So he's just kind of using this rhetoric to escalate. There was even this address today that if Poland and Lithuania behaves in the correct way, there will be no war against them. So this is very controversial. This is very ambiguous. This is the Minister of Defense, Viktor Khrenin, who said that. So clearly, this is all escalation, right? And incidentally, it happens right after the attack on the bridge, on the Crimean bridge in Ukraine. So this is... So this is kind of all of this shows that they're trying to divert attention and they're trying to sort of provoke, right, and to make it more, I think, costly for the Ukrainian army.
On that note, Hanna, this is one of the things that I've been wondering, and I think maybe a lot of people have as well, which is that have the Ukrainian military or their leaders maybe fallen into a little bit of a Russian trap here? As we know, Russia held those, let's be honest, bogus referendums in various different sites across the country, claimed that they were therefore then Russian. On top of that, then, Ukraine has decided to, well, as we understand it anyway, Ukrainian military has probably been responsible for an attack on that bridge in Crimea. The response now from Vladimir Putin has been to launch various different attacks on, well, largely civilian areas. Do you think that the Ukrainians fell into that trap now? They've kind of awoken the Russian bear yet again. I don't want to say they brought it on themselves, of course, but is this what Putin wanted them to do?
Well, but I would say, well, the war has been happening, the fully fledged war has been happening since February, right? So these are not Ukrainian troops that provoke the Russian army or the Kremlin, right? So the Kremlin attacked first. That was absolutely unprovoked, ungrounded attack, and Ukrainians are responding. They're fighting back. I'm not saying about Crimea, I'm saying in general, right? So that's their legitimate right. And I would say that the recent escalation here also with the participation of Lukashenko, right, only shows that Lukashenko is trying to justify the presence of Russian troops on the territory of Belarus, despite Belarusians are against that. So he has to justify himself as well, right? And we can actually expect more attacks from the territory of Belarus, unfortunately. Russians might attack again.
A concerning development there. If you are just joining us, that is the news that potentially we can expect more attacks from the territory of Belarus into Ukraine. A worrying escalation. Hanna, thank you very much. Hanna Liubakova there, who is a journalist from Minsk, live from Minsk.